Lean in. No, closer, because I'm going to share with you one of the secret Jewish superpowers. Ready? Shabbat Shalom, everybody. My name is Rabbi Cedric Gazinski, and here is the weekly Torah Bite. In this week's Torah portion, we get the answer to one of the questions that has stumped scholars, philosophers, critics, and fans throughout the ages as to how is it that the Jewish people are still around and not only surviving but thriving despite the generational story and history of persecution and exile and suffering and genocide. Well, it's in this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion has the famous Tochacha, which is a series of very harsh verses that depict the consequences of what will happen to the Jewish people if they don't listen to the word of God. Now, the story goes that the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement, used to be the Torah reader in his synagogue, in his shul, in the city of Liadi. He had a son, Dovber, who eventually became his successor, the Mittler Rebbe. And Dovber would sit in the shul and hear the Torah reading from his father every single week. One year, the Alter Rebbe was not in town for this particular Shabbat, and a substitute Torah reader read this parsha and the Tochacha, the curses that are contained within it. When young Dovber heard these curses read by the Torah reader, he was so profoundly affected that he became physically ill, to the point where weeks later on Yom Kippur, his father was still not sure if he was healthy enough to fast on the day of Yom Kippur. The Hasidim came to Dovber and said, "You hear these words every single year, because we go through the Torah cycle every year. So you heard this Torah portion and the curses in it last year and the year before, and yet you weren't affected this way. Why are you all of a sudden so affected?" And he answered, "Because all the other years, my father would be the Torah reader. And when my father would read this, I wouldn't hear curses. All I would hear are blessings." Now, this is interesting because the words don't change. The really harsh depictions don't change. But what the Mittler Rebbe was talking about was something that has sustained the Jewish people and has been our superpower throughout the ages, which is the Jewish people have often been on the receiving end of a pretty difficult times and terrible challenges. And what has helped us get through them and not only survive but thrive is that we are maminim b'nei maminim. We are believers, the children of believers. And this doesn't just mean that we believe in God, but that we also believe that God is our Father in heaven. And ultimately, what comes from Him, even if in the moment it feels like curses and consequences and difficulties, ultimately is our Father in heaven. And so, what comes from Him is a blessing. Like a parent to a child, oftentimes has to do things that the child at the time doesn't understand why this is ultimately for their good. But we hope that the child does have that trust and faith that if it is coming from their parents, then it is ultimately for their good. And just that awareness, even if we don't know why, but just the fact that it is coming from my father, means that I can see it as a blessing, even if the words, even if on the surface it doesn't appear to be so. And that is what the Mittler Rebbe was saying. When my father read these, the Alter Rebbe was reading from the Torah, because this was a man who had that kind of faith so deep and that transcendental insight, then it was conveyed in the way he read the curses in the Torah, that ultimately there's a deeper sense that this is from God and they are blessings. And also probably helped that the Alter Rebbe was the Mittler Rebbe's father, was this young Dovber's father. So he was, let's say, preconditioned to hear these words from his father as words of a blessing, like that which comes from a father. The things that come from a father really are. And so, to each and every one of us, let us utilize this superpower, because we're coming on Rosh Hashanah. We're going to ask God that everything we should have in the coming year be good. Now, it could very well be that we're going to face challenges and difficulties this coming year. And we can have two approaches. If, God forbid, sometimes people will lose their job, they'll have a brush with illness, etc. If we say, "Oh, woe is me, the consequence, God hates me, and this is more than I can handle," this is coming from your Father in heaven. Maybe we want to understand why this is good and how this is a blessing. But if it's coming from our Father in heaven, we can overcome the challenge. We can be better on the other side of it, and just that knowledge itself will help it be so. So let's learn the message from this parsha. Let's go out and live our life in a way that everything that God does is a blessing. Now let me see if I can figure out how to make it so. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.